Continue with this spiritual gathering that seeks to bring us together in ways not just around conversation, but in ways that are deep, in ways that come right to the heart of our spirits, and right to celebrating and committing to our highest values. And so we gather this morning in that spirit and in the energy that we have to bring that energy into our singing, into our prayers, into our being together and reflecting with one another. And so we do that first by giving thanks to life. If we're able, we'll stand, we'll sing, we'll join together. We celebrate the life that lives within us. Breath and heartbeat, joy and sorrow, dance and stillness. We celebrate the life that lives between us.
Loving, understanding, creating, embracing, and letting go.
We celebrate the wisdom of life hidden in this present moment. We celebrate the source of life,
of which our lives are one loving expression.
And so we join our words together in the ever-creating energy
in which we live. We celebrate life. We are grateful for the gift of time, for all that is past and gone, yet integral to who we are and who we are becoming. We seek to open with gratitude to the gifts and struggles of this present moment, which call us into risk and newness. With joy and uncertainty, together we journey into the future. We gather seeking to be faithful to the wisdom of the ages, to be true to our highest values and deepest convictions, and to honor the life that will come after us. May it be so.
And so we invite ourselves to be fully present.
Each week when we gather, we place a light in our midst as the symbol of our intention to live in ways that seek light, ways that reflect light, and ways that honor the light in others. Light connects us with the past as we remember the light that was in our yesterdays. It connects us with the present and the gift of this new day. And it connects us with the hope that draws us into the future. And so we bring ourselves here to celebrate the light that is within each one of us, to honor the light we have received from those who've gone before us, and to bring our light to the light of a new day, together to make a new future. And so we bring ourselves to this time and this place with each other.
when we're young, we learn some really important things, particularly at the beginning of our lives. We learn really, really, really important stuff. Like, you know, one of the very first things we learn to do is to get food in our mouths and to eat and swallow and all that kind of stuff. And we learn how to do that. But then as we grow, like, into bigger babies and bigger kids, we have to learn other stuff, right? Like what's some of the stuff you have to learn when you're a baby or a toddler or a kid? Walk. Perfect.
Drooling.
You have to learn how to drool. Sometimes before we walk, we have to we move, we scooch on our bums, or we crawl a little bit. We have to learn how to go to the bathroom. What are we all doing right now? We're talking. We have to learn words, right? Did you get yourselves dressed this morning? Oh, so we have to learn how to get dressed, right? So there's so many things to learn when we're young, right? Now,
The last thing is
how to ride a bike
and a scooter.
and a scooter, definitely.
Two-wheeler.
Yes, a two-wheeler, yes, and a hoverboard. Have you learned that yet? Oh, wait, there's no hoverboards yet? Oh. Now, wait.
Someone,
Who taught you a lot of these things?
our parents,
Your parents.
my dad.
Your dad. Did, there's, I'm sure it's true. Maybe your mom helped too. Yeah, I mean, there's crawling, there's walking, there's talking. We have to have someone to copy sometimes, right? Like when we learn a new word, sometimes we're copying one of our parents. When they say it, we copy it. And some of our parents taught us really important things. Now, who taught them how to do those things? Oh, their parents. Okay, well, who taught them? Who taught your parents' parents how to talk?
Your grandmas.
Your grandmas? Good one.
And your grandpa?
And your grandpas? Well, who taught them?
Your parents.
Yes, that's right. You don't want me to ask another one, do you? No. I could tell by the way you answered the last one. Ah.
Learn how to play games.
So, how far back does that go? How many parents taught their kids how to do stuff?
500.
Tons. 500? Maybe. Maybe more. 1,000? Who knows? It's just a lot. It's a lot. It's more than we can count even. I don't know. There's no way to know. I don't know. But a whole lot. And it goes way, way back. And so, in Kids Spirit lately, we've been learning about the ways that we're the same and ways that we're different and how we can learn from one another. When we're different from each other, we can learn from each other. When we see those differences, it's a chance to learn from one another. So we've been learning from people that are around us, right? We learn from our parents. We learn from our grandparents. We learn from teachers. We learn from aunts and uncles and friends. We learn from a lot of people that are all around us. But you know what? We learn from a whole lot of people that we didn't even know we learned from. Like those grandparents of grandparents of grandparents. We didn't even know them. But somehow, because they taught their children, and they taught their children, and they taught their children, and they taught you, we're still learning from them. It's amazing. So we can learn from the people around us, but we can also learn from people a long time ago that we've never even met. And that's amazing. Sometimes we can read their stories. Sometimes we can hear people talk about them. There's so many ways that we can learn from one another. And all those people still have so much to teach us. And that's an amazing thing. So I'm really thankful for learning, from the people right here on this carpet. I learn from you and the people in this room. I'm also thankful that I can learn from people that I never knew. And that our wisdom and our knowledge and everything we learn can come from so many different places. It's amazing. So thank you for coming to the carpet. I wonder if you would stay here for 2 minutes while we sing a song. And then, since I'm your leader today, then I'll go with you to Kids Spirit. But we're going to sing, and I have to go to the piano just now. So we'll do that, and then we'll go to Kids Spirit, and youth are invited to Youth Cafe this morning.
We're going to sing together a piece that Chris wrote on sabbatical, and a piece of music that we had the opportunity to sing several times last weekend with the community that gathered at Meewasin Valley United, and that some of you began to learn together one Sunday after our spiritual gathering in late September. So we're going to begin learning it, and we'll continue learning it over this month of November, our highest values.
Ready to go? Let's go. Come on.
This is a reading from the Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. The word mana is a term originally used by Polynesian and Melanesian cultures to describe an extraordinary power or force residing in a person or an object, a sort of spiritual electricity that charges anyone who touches it. Carl Jung later described the term as the unconscious influence of one being on another. What Jung speaks to is the fact that the energy of being real has more power than outright persuasion or debate or the force of will. The beautiful and simple truth of this can be seen by looking at the sun. The sun, without intent or will or plan or sense of principle, just shines thoroughly and constantly. By being itself, the sun warms with its light, never withholding or only warming certain things on the earth. Rather, the sun emanates in all directions all the time, and things grow. In the same way, when we're authentic, expressing our warmth and light in all directions, we cause things around us to grow. When our souls are like little suns, expressing the light of who we are, we emanate what Jesus called love and what the Buddha called compassion, and the roots of community lengthen. In this way, by being who we are, we not only experience life in all its vitality, but quite innocently and without design, we help others be more thoroughly themselves. In being real, in staying devoted to this energy of realness, we help each other grow toward one vital light. This is the insight of a contemporary poet. Three of the Gospels in our Christian scriptures tell a story about a time in the life of Jesus of Nazareth when he couldn't carry his burdens alone. A time of decision, a time of crisis, of identity and purpose. This is the earliest of those three versions we have of the story, the version Mark's Gospel gives us. Jesus took with him Peter and James and John, and he led them up onto a high mountain apart from everyone else, by themselves. And his appearance changed before their very eyes, and his clothes became dazzling white. And there appeared to them Elijah along with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Teacher, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He didn't know what to say because they were all terrified. And a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice was heard saying, "This is my child, the beloved. Listen to him." And when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore. Jesus was now alone. This is a story passed down to us from the first century. I recently marked the 34th anniversary of my ordination. Yes, I was 5 at the time. I remember so well that very cool evening, a month before my 24th birthday. We were gathered into the gentle darkness of an autumn Sunday evening in the dark, wooded, stained glass sanctuary of Melville Presbyterian Church in West Hill, Scarborough. Ironically for me, it's just a stone's throw from West Hill United Church, currently under the leadership of Greta Vosper. Gathered there with me were members of my family, some of my classmates from Toronto School of Theology, 3 Roman Catholic brothers with whom I had shared a clinical pastoral education experience, colleagues from East Toronto Presbytery, and members of the congregation that I had served in a field placement, along with the minister of my sponsoring congregation from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. I remember well the weight of the hands of all of those ordained persons in that assembly being placed on me when I was launched into the vocation that had drawn me from the time I was 10 years old. Many of us experience a similar kind of moment in our lives, whether speech or the first day on a job, or having to make certain commitments, or being sworn in to the bar or the bench or to whatever our profession, or being granted a license or a ticket to practice our trade or our vocation. In the weight of all those hands on me, I felt also the weight of all the expectations that were awaiting me. It was the 1980s. And we were still thinking of the church as though it were the 1950s. And I was appointed to a new church development on the western city limit of Calgary with the expectation that I would lead a community to gather and grow in sufficient numbers and resources that we could establish not only a presence, but build a church building in that expanding residential area in Calgary. And I also felt the weight of the expectations that I would find something meaningful to say every week of my life for the rest of my life. And that I would find the wisdom to navigate the conflicts and the decisions that various communities of faith with whom I would serve would make. And the weight of expectations that I would be there to celebrate the joys and the sorrows in the lives of those with whom I shared community. Again, those expectations were not unique to the vocation of ministry. We all feel the weight of expectations in our lives, whatever our roles and whatever responsibilities we carry. And it was a tradition in that ordination ceremony that 2 charges were given, 2 sermons, 1 offering, but 2 sermons. One of those charges was directed to the congregation as to how they might support and challenge and share leadership with those whom they welcomed into the vocation of paid accountable ministry. And the other charge was directed toward me as the newest member of my vocational community. And I only remember 2 things that were said to me that evening. The colleague who had been my supervisor in my field placement at Melville Church said to me, "Whatever else you do, be yourself and be biblical." 34 years ago, that sounded incredibly simple. Little did I know how costly it would be to engage that advice over the years. Little did I know in that moment how difficult it would be to know oneself and then to be oneself. Little did I know in that moment that the path of being oneself is neither smooth, nor linear, nor obvious, nor instant, nor easy. And for most of us, it takes a lifetime to live into the advice buried in those two simple words, be yourself. And I've come to think that it's about more than to thine own self be true. I've come to think that it means to be about being a person of integrity and authenticity, trustworthy, compassionate, respectful. And little did I know that evening that living into that second piece of advice I was given, to be biblical, would lead me to reframe and reinterpret my understanding of the nature and the value of all sacred texts, these ones included, again and again in my life. That time would reframe my understanding that sacred texts are everywhere. They're in film and in nature and in literature and in our lived experience. If we're not writing texts with our lives that are sacred, what are we doing? That there are many sources of wisdom and inspiration. I would come to embrace an understanding of the Bible as a very human product of two ancient cultures, which reflects bias and belief. Contains a tribal and scientifically primitive understanding of the world, says more about how an ancient community interpreted their life and their world than it does say about any one and true divine source, and offers sources of wisdom in some archetypal stories and some enduring truths and insights which are timeless in their witness and helpful always in our quest for meaning. And I've come to think that to be biblical is to be grounded in wisdom ancient and new, in wisdom within and wisdom without. And it is to challenge the assumptions of some of the stories we're given and some of the teachings that are passed down to us. And it is always to keep turning the prism of whatever texts we're reading, looking for whatever light they might reflect. I've long been intrigued by that story we heard a moment ago, which 3 first-century communities give us about Jesus of Nazareth. That mystical story in which Jesus is given an audience, if you will, with 2 of the heroes of his tradition. We're left to imagine what advice each of those visitors from the past might have offered him in that moment. The story doesn't create that detail. It leaves it to our imaginations. But it does set that story at a crossroads moment for Jesus. That story is stitched into a stage in his life as he faces the conflict and the crisis of what it means for him to be himself, to be true to his truth, to be faithful to his vision, to embody the values that he himself had been teaching. What is it to live one's love of enemy? What is it to live radical equality? What is it to live what it means to cross the boundaries that culture draws in order to be inclusive? So at that intersection of expectations, of pressures from his family and his friends and his opponents, the storytellers give him an audience with the representatives of the twin pillars of his tradition. Moses is standing in for the law, and Elijah is standing in for the prophets. In the world of the story, he has sought solitude with his closest companions. With Peter, James, and John, he sought to get away from it all, to go to a high place at a low time in his life. And so the story takes him to a mountain, typically what is a place of revelation and a place of discernment in his tradition. And the story places him in the company of these ancient leaders of his people, giving us the impression, perhaps, that he is receiving their memory or their counsel. It's a kind of WWMD sort of moment, you know, what would Moses do? Or a WWED kind of moment, what would Elijah do if they were in his sandals? We probably all have some heroes we'd like to conjure up for advice. Those whose counsel we'd like to consult. If we had some way to access them across the great divide of death, of history, of time. It's perhaps one of those places of deepest grief in our lives, when we have joys that we would love to celebrate, or decisions we have to make, or sorrows we long to share. We experience again and again the loss of those whose companionship and wisdom or mentorship has been so important to us. Whenever we stand at a crossroads, the intersections of the walk, don't walk in our lives, we long for the wisdom of those whose good counsel we would value so much. It might be a hero of history, or it might be a hero of our own hearts. Whichever's the case, we long for their advice. And the story gives Jesus that kind of a moment of companionship, of communion, of counsel, from which he emerges with his nearest and dearest to be true to himself and to be true to his sense of identity and his sense of purpose. But such moments of decision, such moments of dilemma, require us not only to consult with the past, but as we're learning from our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, we are learning that we must consider ourselves in relationship to the generations who will come after us. The great law of the Iroquois. In every deliberation, we must consider the impact on the 7th generation, even if it requires having skin as thick as the bark of a pine. And that mountain of getting away from it all, that mountain of finding perspective and strength, that mountain where we get to commune with the longer view, has a way of always sending us back to the valley where life is lived and we must cross some street in the face of walk, don't walk. And what I see in this story is a way of modeling what it means to be true to ourselves, what it means to be faithful to the present. Jesus didn't choose to be a new Moses or a second Elijah. He didn't need to compete with John the Baptist. He didn't need to satisfy the expectations of the zealots who would have followed him in an armed uprising that would have been a suicide mission against the Romans. He didn't choose to be a contemplative and take his place in the desert with the monastic Essenes. He didn't meet all of the hopes and the expectations, even of his closest friends and followers. He didn't choose to be all things to all people. He never said yes to everything and anything that was asked of him. Grounded in compassion and faithful to a peaceful path toward his vision of justice. He came down from that mountain to act with integrity and authenticity and let the chips fall where they may. I learned that to be yourself takes practice. That being authentic is a habit. That being true to oneself is to be grounded in the highest values, and it takes attention and intention. So this is our time to pause and consider what being real requires of us. What are the expectations we have to set aside? Is there a falseness we have to unmask? Is there something realness requires of us? What is it that we must return to life for the privilege of our breath, whatever its price? Together with so many Christian communities around the globe, we honor All Saints Sunday, a day that follows All Hallows Eve, a day that is often known as All Souls Day, a day in which our tradition believed that the veil between life and death was very thin, a mystical time in our passage through time. As has been our practice each year, we name those who have gone before us, those whose lives have been celebrated in this community over the past year, those who are planted in our memorial garden and whose names appear on the Circle of Life tree, and those names each of us bring that we hold in our hearts and from whom we draw strength and from whose memory we discern light. And so I'll invite us into a reflective time of prayers in which those names will be offered, candles will be lit, and after each time you hear the words, "You who light the path before us," please respond with the words, "May we be faithful to the flame we have received." Let us pause with one another as we pray. In holy mystery, we are seized with wonder. The wonder that we're here at all in this place and in this time, living these short lives on this singular planet. We're seized with the wonder that we're not lost in the stars, that life stirs as mysteriously present in us as it does in the galaxies, stirring us to stories and songs and prayers that bind us to the long story. That Spirit broods over the deep of our lives, where we're healing our hurts, where we're helping one another remember, where we're finding hope that can transform anguish into wisdom, pain into beauty, failure into freedom, guilt into understanding. There have been among us those compassionate enough to stand against cruelty, those fierce enough to fight indifference, those who've been courageous enough to hold power accountable, prophetic enough to expose the poverty of wealth, bold enough to stare down violence, imaginative enough to keep us from the brink of extinction, ordinary and extraordinary in the witness they have given us. For those who have gone before us into death but live in our hearts, we pause to remember these beloved ones with deep gratitude. Louise Adams, Ron Adams, Maureen Andrew, Bertha Ayres, Brian Barkwell, Kevin Barkwell, Doris Becker, Noreen Blackerman, Margaret Borick, Alvin Buchholz, Mona Buchholz, Jim Budd. You light the path before us. Vera Chorney, Kathy Chorney Olson, Sharon Costel, Jane Cumming, Cameron Cunningham, Dennis Dubé, Wayne Aker, Diane Lois Evans, Joy Faust, Eleanor Fisher, Bert Fry, Evelyn Fry, Jim Gunn, Sherry Guzzo, Karen Ann Harvey, Bob Hetherington, Neil Hibbert, Margaret Hickmott, Barb Hurl, Wilda Hurst. You light the path before us. Arnie Johnson, Jean Jordan, Shirley Junk, Andrew King, Donald King, Joan King, Jean Kabilka, Ken Kabilka, Dennis Lane, Anne Lee, Doris Mackay, Gordon McFadden, Beryl Mitchell, Ray Mitchell. You light the path before us. Andy McPhee, Norma McLeod, Margaret Nethercutt, Chris Nielsen, Ron Oko, John Powell, Leota Rash, Tom Rash, Harold Sager, Andre Shabrak. You who light the path before us. Edna Shirk, Harry Shirk, Laurie Simonson, John Smear, Ken Smith, Ruth Spears, Wendy Spears, Verna Steves, Rob Swanson, Jeannie Thompson, Angela Valley, Ronald Waldron, Robert White. You who light the path before us. Millie Waring, Iva Wood, John Wood, Mary Woodbury, Michael Warren, Thelma Warren, Cameron Wright, Dennis Young, David Zingle. You who light the path before us. Now in our place, any names that you wish to speak into this circle. the path before us. In silence, we now name those whose memory we carry, whose names have not been spoken into this circle, but who are forever a part of the fabric of life. In the light of all that has gone before us, and all who have gone before us, may we burn fully and faithfully all the days of our lives. May it be so. Amen.
When we participate in this ritual at this table, we are connecting with the memory of our tradition. We honor the feast of freedom that our Jewish ancestors observed in their celebration of Passover. We recall stories from the life of Jesus of Nazareth, who sought to abolish the segregation around the tables of his time and reframed the ancient feast with his friends.
After their leader was executed, when the friends of Jesus ritualized the sharing of bread and wine, they deepened their intention to be true to the vision that he had inspired in them, to be a beloved community, a kingdom, even in the midst of empire.
We share the ritual of this table to connect with our compassion, to strengthen our hope, and to share our quest for right relationship with all that is sacred.
Whenever we eat and we drink, we share in the solar communion of all life. May we translate the energy we find in bread and in the fruit of the vine into that which inspires us to live more truly, more faithfully, more compassionately, with deeper hope, that we might be worthy of our breath. This is our opportunity to gather at this table where we are drawn not because we are members of this or any church. We are welcome at this table, not as an expression of our beliefs, but we are welcome to come to this table to seek whatever nourishment we need, whatever hope we need, whatever act in communion and community with one another we need, to more faithfully reflect the light that is within us, the light of our highest values. We are all welcome. Come, eat and drink. These are the gifts of a good earth and the gifts of our tradition, and they're for all of us. The light we have shared here, the light of all who have gone before us, the light of this day that draws us into newness. The light within ourselves is not extinguished from our gathering, but is changed. The energy is changed into a new form as we take our light from this circle in faithfulness to be true. And so we go, singing our commitment to ourselves, to one another, and to our world.